so pleased to have on the show Representative Art Carney. Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing, oh, I don't know, an Oscar with you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You are Art Carney's grandson.
Yep.
And with that comes lots of stories. So first of all, Art Carney wins an Oscar in 1975 for a movie called Harry and Tonto. What did he tell you? Now, he has since passed. What kinds of stories did he tell you about winning that Oscar in late in life?
He was definitely surprised he won. If you look at the people he beat, I mean, he beat some of...
Well, let's talk about that.
Sure.
Albert Finney, Dustin Hoffman, Jack Nicholson, Al Pacino. So he wins.
Right.
Shocked?
He was very shocked. And if you see, you know, Al Pacino, that was for Michael Corleone, which is probably Al Pacino's most famous role. Jack Nicholson for Chinatown, another one of his most famous roles. So definitely in shock. Definitely in shock. And he was not known as a movie star. He was known as a TV and stage star at that point. So.
When he accepted his award, he thanked his agent, and his agent said, "Take the part, you're old,"
right.
Which is what he said on stage. When he brought the Oscar home, your age at the time was what? Were you even here?
I was not born yet.
You were not even
no.
here yet. So what did the family share with you about the stories when he first brought the Oscar home?
Just they were also in shock and just very grateful that he was able to win, because he'd had a very accomplished career, but as I said, it wasn't really so much in movies, so this really solidified him as the great talent that he was.
All right, let's look at some pictures and take a walk down memory lane.
Sure.
And we're going to start with the first one of you at age 13 or 14
right. Yep.
with Art Carney and your grandmother.
My grandmother.
Tell me the story about them.
Sure.
It's complicated a bit.
It is a little complicated, but they went to high school together. They were both from Mount Vernon. And my grandmother was running for some political office, either it was class president or vice president or something like that. And back in those days, you'd have somebody else to give your speech for you. For whatever reason, I don't know, but she ended up picking him to give her speech. And it just, they hit it off, and they were together pretty much ever since, until the 1950s, when they actually got a divorce. And they both married other people, and then eventually divorced those people, and then got back together in the late 70s and eventually remarried.
And she was not with him when he won his Oscar?
No. So the woman you see in the video with
on
him,
YouTube,
on
if
YouTube,
you Google it,
right? Is actually his second wife.
And how long a marriage was that?
That was about, I want to say, around 10 years.
Okay. And then they fell in love again
right.
and remarried.
Right.
All right, next picture, and this is how all of us know Art Carney. We grew up with the Honeymooners. Tell me about the relationship between he and Jackie Gleason.
So people always ask me about, did you know Jackie Gleason? Were they friends? And the truth is, they really weren't friends. It was really a working relationship. So Jackie Gleason just saw something in my grandfather. My grandfather had been on a lot of radio. He was on the Maury Amsterdam show before the Honeymooners and the Jackie Gleason show, and Jackie Gleason just thought he was so funny and such a great talent that he got him to come onto the Jackie Gleason show, and then eventually they created both Ralph Cramden and Ed Norton together.
So Gleason saw something in him. He was very gracious then, because he really developed Norton's character
Yep.
over the years.
Yeah.
When the relationship ended, so they didn't stay acquaintances or friends. Do you know about that?
I don't think they really stayed friends, but they had several reunions. They did actually a colorized Honeymooners, I think in the 70s. It was actually had music, and then they did a couple of TV movies together. I know they did one called Izzy and Mo, where they played bank robbers. So they stayed somewhat in touch in a working relationship.
So that really launched his career on TV.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
All right, the next picture that we have, Walter Matthau. What is this a photo of?
So this is a photo of The Odd Couple, the Neil Simon play that eventually became a movie and the television show. And my grandfather actually started the role of Felix Unger. We know Jack Lemmon played him in the movie, and Tony Randall in the 70s show, and then there's the reboot now. But he was the one who actually started it as Felix Unger on Broadway with Walter Matthau as Oscar Madison.
How did he like the transition from television to movies? It's a different animal.
It is a different animal. I think his favorite, I would guess his favorite was stage. He loved being on the stage. He loved radio a lot also. I mean, he wasn't big into movies. That's why you see his film credits aren't that extensive, much more in TV and stage.
Next photo is of your grandfather
Yeah.
as a Santa. What is this from?
So this is from the Twilight Zone episode, The Night of the Meek, and this is one of the most famous Twilight Zone.
I love that title, The Night of the Meek.
It's actually one of the most famous Twilight Zone episodes. He plays a department store Santa who has a drinking problem, and he wishes to, you know, basically help the world, and he ends up meeting he ends up finding a sack, and in that sack are toys, and he gives them to all these people, and he actually becomes a department store Santa, actually becomes the real Santa at the end of the Twilight Zone episode. And this isn't the only time he played Santa, though. When I was a kid, he was Santa Claus in a movie called The Night They Saved Christmas with Jacqueline Smith. And when I was a kid, I remember we would watch it, and I knew right away. I said, "That's not Santa. That's Poppy." So.
What was your relationship with your grandfather?
We had a great relationship. When I grew up in Old Saybrook. That's where I live today, and he and my grandmother lived in Westbrook. So when I was a kid, I would see them at least twice a week. They would pick me up from middle school, and my mom was working. They'd pick me up from middle school, and pretty much until I was able to drive. So I spent a lot of days with him doing various activities like bowling and mini golf and things like that. So we had a really, really good time together.
Did he ever talk about Hollywood with you? Did you ever ask him? Because you're interested in that stuff.
Definitely. He didn't actually talk about it that much. To me, he was just Poppy. He was my grandfather. And when I was growing up, he had pretty much stopped doing a lot of things. I remember when I was a kid, he was in Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger, a very small role. And I was definitely interested in that because it was Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I think at the time I think I was 9 or 10 years old. You know, everybody loved Arnold Schwarzenegger from the Terminator movies, and he actually got me Arnold's autograph. So that was a really great moment for me when I was a kid.
You know, I have to tell you a story, and maybe I have told you this before, but I had the good fortune of running into Art Carney at a Staples in Old Saybrook. And he said to me, "Ann, how are you?" And I turned around and I said, "How does Art Carney know who I am?" And it started a bit of a relationship between the two of us in that he was such a charming, down-to-earth guy. And we would ask him from Channel 8, "Hey, will you do this or that?" He'd always say yes. And he had the hat from the Honeymooners that he fooled around with. Did you kids ever fool around with that hat? Or didn't he let you?
No, he let us, but not too much. I don't recall playing with that hat too much, but he would put it on and do funny things. He was a very, very funny man. He was reserved, but he was very funny around his family.
All right, let's look at the another picture. Now, he's with a creature.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. Was this a film? Yes, right?
So this is actually really funny. This is from the Star Wars Holiday Special. So who he's with is Chewbacca.
Right.
And the Star Wars Holiday Special is something that George Lucas, I think, wishes was never made, because if you've seen it, you'd know why. It came out after the 1977 Star Wars: A New Hope.
So this is 2 years after he won the Oscar.
A few years after he won the Oscar, and they did a holiday episode celebrating Chewbacca's Wookiee Holiday of Life Day. I mean, this is really out there. And it was a 2-hour special, and he played a character by the name of Trader Son Dan, who helps Chewbacca get home. And you know, now as Star Wars is certainly getting more and more popular with the new movie, I always tell people, well, my grandfather's part of the Star Wars universe, and they get excited about that. So,
but we haven't seen it. I'm gonna have to look that one up too.
George Lucas, I think you can't find it any official
because
copies.
He doesn't want you to find it.
I don't think he does, but you can find it on the internet some places.
All right, this photo is charming. Tell me about this movie.
So this is from Going in Style. This is one of my favorite movies that he was in with George Burns, who he loved, and Lee Strasberg, who was the famous acting coach.
How do you know he loved?
He didn't talk too much about a lot of celebrities, but when he talked about George Burns, he just thought he was so funny and such a nice man. So he really, really liked him, and he had a picture of George Burns in his he had a little den and he had a picture of George Burns with an autograph. And he wasn't a big autograph guy, but he liked that one. So.
And you said they're redoing this.
They are redoing this. It's going to be with Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman, and Alan Arkin. I'm not sure when it's going to come out, though. So.
All right. Well, I'm sure it's going to be good.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Let's look at this next photo. Is this from Harry and Tonto?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for which he won the Oscar. Talk about this film. He won the Oscar. You weren't on the planet yet. This catapulted him into a different stratosphere.
Right. Yeah. This was the movie that really made him a movie star in a lot of ways. It was a small movie, just about a guy who goes cross country to see his 3 children with his cat. He gets evicted from his apartment in New York. And it was a tour de force performance. He was, I believe, in every single scene of the movie, and just showed how much of a range he had. You know, you see a lot of times people who start out as comedians, whether it's Tom Hanks, who went on to do some of the best, finest dramatic acting we've ever seen, and I think that's something. Robin Williams is another one, and I think my grandfather really showed that comedians can do serious work too.
Be dramatic actors.
Yeah.
And then finally the picture of your grandfather with the Oscar.
Yeah.
Now this Oscar gets seen every year at the Katharine Hepburn Cultural Arts Center,
Yep.
which you're so gracious enough to bring. And so if folks come on Oscar night, they get to see this Oscar. When you carry Oscar around, what is Art Carney, the grandson, thinking?
I'm just so proud of my grandfather that he was able to achieve this. I mean, you can't really get much higher than this as an actor in film, and he was able to win this for a fantastic movie. And I'm proud that this keeps his memory alive. You know, that he is one of very few people to be able to win Best Actor. It's only been given out since the late 1920s, so there's fewer than 100 actors who've been able to win this award. So it just makes me so proud to be his grandson.
And you're representing the 23rd District
Yep.
in the state of Connecticut, so you're a lawmaker now.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any Art Carney in you as you head up to the State House now and again?
I try to be funny sometimes. I try to, you know, things can get a little stressful up there at times. so I like to bring out some of his humor, and I think I get that from him. And I like to act as well. I acted in high school and college, and I actually did a community theater show at the Cape a couple of years ago. So I do like to do that and see movies and things like that.
And there are other actors in your family.
Yep. Yeah. My uncle Brian is a commercial actor. He does voiceovers and actually stars in commercials. And my second cousin, Reeve Carney, is on Showtime's Penny Dreadful, and he played Spider-Man on Broadway in the Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark show.
Your grandmother, what did she think of being married to a very famous guy?
That was one of the great things about my grandmother. I think she just saw him as art. She didn't think of it too much as him being a celebrity, and he liked that. He liked, while he did like the limelight to a degree, he loved ending his, about the last 20 years of his life just being in Westbrook, Connecticut with my grandmother. So.
Well, Representative Devin Carney, thank you so much for coming on and bringing the Academy Award, which most of us never get to see or hold one of these, and they are heavy.
Right.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
When we're missing, who's this girl I spend all night kissing? And if was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm so wishing I could find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store of my mind. Just the same time, skip right ahead to the last ride. The harder we look, the